Get ready. You're listening to Give God 90 live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ready, please.
Welcome everyone to Give God 90 live. Hi. You're ready whether we are or not.
Right.
One of these days I will get this technology figured out. I promise. One of these days. I don't know when it will be, but it will be. It will happen. Yep, everything should be good. You got sound there?
No.
No? Okay. Don't mind us. We're just doing some technical stuff. We're trying to make sure everything's working and everything you can hear and
Hi,
all
Cindy.
that good stuff. Hi, Cynthia. One thing right off the get-go, I know this is backwards, okay, but that's just the way it is on Facebook Live when you do use the cameras on the iPads and the phones and that kind of stuff.
Your wording's backwards.
It actually says pray, obey, repeat, and yes, Cindy, I know that the color wasn't exactly your favorite, but there's a reason behind the colors. And that reason is when I did the Give God 90 app, I looked at the colors that they had to offer for the app, and I thought, well, purple's the color of royalty. So I thought, well, we got to have purple. And I know this isn't exactly purple, but it's close. And the yellow, actually is supposed to be almost a gold. This is a little brighter than I wanted, but it's the closest I could get for, of course, the crown, right? You get your reward. That's why the color combination there. And after tomorrow night, when everybody else gets their shirts, the remaining shirts will be available at Cindy's Pantry in Laurel, Delaware.
Nice.
So, good to go. I know she's kind of excited about that because she reminded me again the other day about it. So.
Okay. That'd be awesome. Thanks.
Also, I want to remember some friends and supporters are currently traveling in. They have made it to Israel. They really have made it to Israel. And you're going to have to do this because I can't do that and think and talk all at the same time. Pictures of crossing the Jordan, pictures of Galilee, the Kinneret. They're just having a good time.
They are.
I think they're having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have.
Right. They're going to explode. They're having so much fun.
So, make sure that we keep them prayed up to be safe. Also, don't forget a good friend. Last week, she entered hospice. Dr. Sean's mother entered hospice. Sunday, she did pass, and our prayers go out to Sean. Hey, Jay.
And Colleen.
And
Lynette.
And all the
and everybody
the
else
Greener
that
family.
might be listening.
But yeah, that, when I think about, and I've been around quite a few, not as many as you now because you work in a hospital, but quite a few people that passed. When we were there on Saturday, the look in her eyes, even though she had had a stroke, she was laying there, the look in her eyes was, it's okay. God's got this.
Mm-hmm. It was.
And that was just amazing to watch. She really has. What'd you do?
I don't know.
That was just. There you go. You weren't plugged in. Okay. Again, technical difficulties. But hey, I know now that the sound works.
I can't hear that.
Turn your volume up on your thingies. Okay. What else do we have? Oh, I need to remember the new folks because some good stuff's happening.
Oh, yes.
People are actually... It's raining. People are actually sharing. They're hitting that like button both on Spreaker and on Facebook Live. They're sharing this. It's going out to people that... like-minded people, I guess we could say, that really appreciate it. By the way, if our electric goes out, we will try to pick up later where it goes out at. No promises on when it'll be back, though.
The wind just started really hard, and
there is a line of
rain was pelting.
thunderstorms coming down the coast, so just be aware. If you hear some weird noises, it's probably rain or thunder or lightning, something like that. But it's okay. It's all good. You guys are sharing. You guys are putting it out there, and I'll tell you what, the likes and the shares are great. Keep hitting those like buttons, hit those share buttons, because that helps us grow. If you
Hi, Jay. Hi, Tina. Hi, sis. Carol.
if you like what you hear and you think that other people need to hear it, share it. It's great. Something I haven't been really promoting a whole lot. And I don't know exactly. I don't want this to sound like an advertisement, but it's going to sound like an advertisement. But that's okay. If you like what you hear, and I know there's a lot of people around the country and around the world that like this, they use this, they do different things with it. If you think that having me come speak to your group, maybe it's a church, maybe it's a fellowship. If it's a church, talk to your pastor first. Mm-hmm. Because, sometimes they don't agree with what we say. But that's okay. I can adjust and adapt to get in. Well, I don't want to say get into the churches, but to
share some of our knowledge.
Well, to have even the pastor appreciate the point of view that we're coming from.
Right.
I am very critical of denominations. Mm-hmm. And the point that I'm critical of, for the most part, is that they put their doctrine ahead of Scripture. And that's a no-no. So if you think that is beneficial, it might be not as cost prohibitive as you might think, depending on where you live. You can contact us through, the easiest way is to go to the Give God 90 website. There is a contact page there because that comes directly into my email and it goes flashy, and I know who's been there. Other ways you can comment on the Facebook, you can comment on Spreaker, you can give me a private message through Facebook as well. There's just all kinds of ways to get up with us. All right, so there's that. If you think your group can benefit from something we have to say or I have to say, or if you just want her.
Oh, now wait a minute.
She's a lot better looking to look at than I am. And you have interesting things to say. You keep me straight. So
yeah, but that's different.
It's different. So as we go through that, just keep that in mind. Tonight, something that hit me the other day as I was doing some other study, and that's something else I wanted to say before I forget, not going down a rabbit trail, but if there's a subject you have questions about, and you want to hear our take on it or my take on it, message me there too, because I don't want to tickle your ears, so to speak, with what you want to hear, but it helps if I know the things you're interested in so that we can address that through the biblical filter standpoint.
Right.
I got that back in there, didn't I?
Yeah, yes, you did. You're going to use that a lot.
So, be sure to let us know if there's something you want to know. Just let us know. Just ask. That's what we're here for. Tonight, why in the world, or I should say why the world, hates Jews and Christians? Now, we're told about this in several places in Scripture, but there's one verse in particular, and don't give it away yet. There's one verse in particular that gives us a reason why the world hates Jews and Christians. But before we get to that, I'm going to make you sit through something else. You need a history lesson. And I actually thought about giving something away, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. to make it fair with Spreaker audience and Facebook audience at the same time.
Right.
It's because, and whether it was a T-shirt or a book or something, the question I was going to ask, because today when people get offended, and you ask them why what offends you, they look at you and say, "Well, you're racist. You're just racist." And we hear it quite often in the political arena, right? We hear it very often there. There's a problem with the word racist. And the question I was going to ask, and,
Hi, Tina, you made it.
And yeah, she's been there for a few minutes now.
I missed her.
I thought you saw that when you...
No, I was saying hi to Jay.
The question I
thought she was listening
going
to
to ask was, when did the word racism enter the language, and by who, according to the Oxford English Dictionary? The answer might surprise you. And, really, from our audiences, either some people are going to, be going Rabbi Google, and that's okay. I encourage you to look stuff up. All right, research and self-study is one of those things we encourage. But the thing is, it's not as old as what people might think, and it's not for the reason people might think. Racism, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, first recorded utterance of the word was by a man named Richard Henry Pratt. Guess you know the year. It's 1902. That recently, the word racism came into the English language. Prior to that, they recognized differences in the race, but they had other terms and remarks and derogatory concepts both ways, What this did, what Richard Pratt did when he came up with this type of term, was he actually segregated classes of people based on where they come from. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. When he did this, I don't think he realized how exact he was with his terms. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, he did not come up with this term based on black or white. It wasn't African American versus European Caucasian American. His basis for using this term racism comes from his interaction with the Native American people who were here to meet the boat, the Mayflower, when it got here. And the article that I was reading this through said, I'm just going to read. This comes from an article, and you can look this up. I might even go back and actually put it in the notes or in the comment section of the video for Facebook and on the comment section for Spreaker. It says, although Pratt might have been the first person to inveigh against racism and its deleterious effects by name, he is much better remembered for a very different coinage. He said something, he used a phrase, and the phrase was, kill the Indian, save the man. What he was talking about was removing the Native American culture from society and making them like these civilized people in the 1900s. Well, that was in 1880. He actually began a school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, for the Native Americans. And what he was trying to do was teach them how to live a civilized lifestyle. He was actually trying to teach them, you don't have to war with each other, you can get along doing these things. But the way they said it back then wasn't very nice. I mean, it was what we would consider today plain English. I don't think he really had, I don't think his intent was hatred. I think his intent was, here's a group of people that we see fighting each other. Wouldn't it be nice if they were more civilized? And that's what I think his intent was.
It just came out wrong.
It just came out wrong for back in the day. So racism doesn't necessarily have to deal with black or white or red and black or yellow and pink or whatever color they are. It deals more with where you're from and how you associate with people.
Mm-hmm.
That gets back to what I want to talk about, why the world hates Jews and Christians. And it's an amazing discovery when you actually sit down and read the Bible. Excuse me for being off camera. That happens in this kind of stuff where you don't have the camera guy back there following people, and you don't have 7 cameras saying, okay, you've got this shot, you've got to kind of stay in tight and do all this kind of stuff. Now, for our Jewish audience, stick with me for just a moment because you're going to hear something out of the New Testament before we get to the Old. All right? John 18 and 19. You want to read John 18 and 19, but don't read the rest of it yet.
If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before you. If you were of the world, and the world would love you as its own. But you are not of the world, since I have chosen you out of the world. Therefore the world hates you.
Okay, now that on itself, I have had people tell me that's why the world hates Christians, because Jesus said the world hates Christians. Well, okay, where'd he get it? He doesn't come up with things on his own. Remember in John, I think it's chapter 8, he said, I can't say anything that the Father has not given me to say. So he had to come up with it from somewhere. He had to have heard the Almighty speak these words and say these words in a way, and now he's telling or saying this to this group of people in a different way. But he's saying the same thing. Okay. So what we have now set up is, hopefully you can follow this logic that I'm trying to make sense of here. We have different types of people in the world that are being associated now as races, not based on color so much as where their culture is from. According to John 18, part of that culture is because you are chosen to be associated with a particular group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deuteronomy 18:9. Just read 18:9. Don't read 18:10 yet. We're not ready for that yet.
The Lord will make you his holy people, as he promised. But you must obey his commands. You must do what he wants you to do.
Okay, that comes from the International Children's Bible, by the way. It says that the Almighty has made you his own. Now that is almost word for word what Yeshua said up there. It's hated me before, if you were of the world will love you, but you're not of the world since I've chosen you, since the Almighty has separated you out, right? You're now in a different class. You're now in a different race because you are no longer what you were. You are now part of Israel, not the nation of Israel, the people group Israel. And that is made up not just of Jews, but of every tribe that came from Jacob. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you're now associated as part of that. What makes that stand out? What was the underlying principle that made the world say, we're going to separate you out and we are going to despise you? There's one particular verse, and this one particular verse goes so deep into this understanding. Go ahead, read Deuteronomy 28:10.
Then everyone on earth will see that you are the Lord's people. They will be afraid of you.
Now that comes from the International Children's Version.
I'm
If
not
you-
reading the next one.
You can't read the next one? For the Facebook folks, hopefully you can see that the next one is in Hebrew. So she's not reading that one. Most of you I know don't speak Hebrew, so I'll just put it. This comes from Masoretic text, which is JPS. The translation that was under that I'm going to paraphrase. It says, "And all the people of the earth will see that the name of Yehovah is called over you." Remember when Aaron stands up and he puts the name of the Almighty on the people? It's known as the Aaronic benediction. Most Christians are familiar with it because at the end of many, many church services, the pastor or somebody will stand up and say, "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord raise his face upon you." And I can't remember the rest of it in English. But because it's a okay translation for the most part. But what Aaron was doing was actually placing the name. He's giving a family name over the people. And every time that's done, you are reminded that you have the family name of the creator of the universe. Okay? So it says, all the people of the earth, everybody else is going to see that you now have a new family name, and it's associated with the creator of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to hate you. But why? Because they're going to be afraid of you. Fear is one of the biggest driving factors of hate. If you're afraid of something, you're not going to like it. You don't want to associate with it, right? Now, we see this today politically, especially with the president. I don't usually get political when I talk about this, but this particular analogy works. There are people who absolutely hate Donald Trump, and they don't know why. They haven't got a clue why. They can't tell you why. All they know is that they're supposed to hate. They've been told to hate him by somebody that they trusted. They don't know why they hate him. I've had conversations with family members, and I say, "Well, okay, tell me why you said what you said." And the response was, "Well, because he is." Well, why? What makes you? Something made you say that. I don't want to talk about this. And I wanted to know, what is it? What am I not seeing that somebody else is seeing? I worked for people that I didn't necessarily like personally. They were, one in particular was a very wealthy business person, very well off, but the personality was miserable. The personality was terrible. So there wasn't that attraction there to be friendly with this person. You just got your work done and went on. Mm-hmm. But it never led me to use derogatory statements towards that person until I found out some of their business dealings, what they were doing. And that really wasn't towards the person, that was towards what they were doing. But the thing is, why? If just because somebody tells you to hate somebody, you're going to hate them?
No.
Now you're the one dividing the races. You're the one dividing the classes. You're the one dividing the cultures. You see something, you're afraid of it, and the reason most people are afraid of him, in my opinion, and that's not a very humble opinion, okay? The reason most people are afraid of him is because he attempts to apply ethical principles in politics. When he says he's going to do something, he does his best to do it. And it doesn't matter if it's building a wall, meeting with the North Korean dictator. He says he's open to meet with the Iranian dictator. He probably is. He's probably very willing to sit down and talk to him and negotiate with him. That's how he made his money. Mm-hmm. Now, does that make him a bad person?
No.
No, not necessarily. Does it make him a good person? Not necessarily.
No.
It makes him someone who is used to dealing with things his own way. And so far, that's made him a very wealthy man. just because somebody tells you to hate is no reason to hate. Now, if you can come up with specifics like unethical business practices, and I mean bona fide unethical business practices. I happen to know people who have worked for Donald Trump, and they say, he's great to work for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've never worked for him, but I have to kind of take their word for it because I've never worked for the man. But I have worked for people who have been unethical. Mm-hmm. It's not fun. You don't stay there very long. That doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad person. Doesn't necessarily mean he deserves the derogatory statements he's been getting. When Barack Obama was president, I don't think he was that good of a president. He did things to the United States directly that we're now finding out was borderline treason. But yet people will hold Barack Obama up above Donald Trump. There's a problem here. And the problem is the world hates Jews and Christians because they are the ones that they're afraid of. People are afraid of Donald Trump. They weren't afraid of Barack Obama. Barack Obama tried very hard to be liked by everybody. Joe Biden's another one. He tries very hard to be liked by everybody. And, he there's things Biden's good at. I'll give him some credit there. There's things he's good at. But the analogy here is just because, if you have a good mechanic, you don't hire a good mechanic to build your house. Okay? You just don't do it. You take your car to a good mechanic. You hire a contractor to build your house. Different concept altogether. Biden was a good mechanic certain times. I don't think he's a good house builder. I don't think he can do it. In fact, I'll get political for a minute. I'm not seeing anybody coming up in either side of these U.S. presidential hopeful people. Candidates is the word I don't see anybody there worthy of a Christian vote or a Jewish vote. I don't see anybody there. They're not. You got to vote for somebody, but I don't see anybody there. The last thing I'll say about politics is if you vote through your biblical filter, okay, if every Christian and every Jewish person in the United States would look at their candidates through that biblical filter, we can turn this country around in one election. Mm-hmm. One election. But you've got to be willing to do it. You've got to be willing to vote through the eyes of the Bible and not through the eyes of politics. Okay, enough on that. People who are afraid of you don't like you. It's that simple. Why are they afraid of you? Why are they afraid of Jews and Christians? Why is the rest of the world so terrified of Jews and Christians that they automatically put on that "we don't like you" flashing red light?
Because they've been told not to?
That's part of the reason. They've been told not to. The people that they listen to have chosen to rebel against the Almighty. When you rebel against the Almighty, you align yourself with His enemy, and He says, you know what? The more people you can convince to come to our side, the better off you're going to be. He forgets to tell them that the better off they might be in the short term. Because in the long term, you ain't going to be that much better off. In fact, you're going to be a lot worse off. Eternity is a long, long time. I'll take my chances over there instead of making my fortune here. Because this one ain't going to last long. Nobody gets out of this world alive, I guarantee you. Nobody. It hasn't happened. And you can't
take any of it with you.
You're not going to take it with you. People who despise you simply because you come from a different culture simply because you associate with a different group of people. When I left mainstream church, there were people who couldn't understand it, right?
Right.
And there were some who automatically said, now you're different. Now you're not like me anymore. I don't like you anymore. Some of them have even forgotten my name.
Mm-hmm.
They will call me a different name every time they see me.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad name, just a different common given name. So you don't think they're bad mouthing me. They don't know who I am. They've forgotten. They have decided you're different than me. I don't like you. And it wasn't based on color. It wasn't based on sex. It wasn't based on religion, really.
Or where you were from.
Or where I was from. All of a sudden, I was different. I was outcast. But I'm used to being outcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. We often talk in our family. It's kind of a race to see who was the blackest sheep of the family sometimes, because it changed in our family every once in a while depending on whose good graces you were with. Whether it was moms or dads, it just kind of depended. And that's the way life is sometimes in a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they hate you, it's because they're afraid of you. But why are they afraid of you? What is it that causes them to be afraid of you? Well, you could read Deuteronomy and find out, but I'll go ahead and tell you. Verse 9. Deuteronomy 18:9. The Lord will make you his holy people. He's promised. But you must obey his commands. You must do what he wants you to do. He's going to set you apart. He's going to take you out of the junk that the rest of the world talks about. And then his promises before and after Deuteronomy 18 are, hey, if you do what I tell you to do, it's not going to be smooth sailing, but trust me, we got this. We can do it. It's all good. And the people see that, they know and understand the authority that you have as a member of the family of the Creator of the universe, and they are terrified of you. James, it says, even the demons believe and they are terrified. There's a reason James was able to write that, and he's able to write it because of Deuteronomy 28:10. They are terrified of the Almighty. People can claim to be atheist. They can claim to be agnostic, but really what it boils down to is they're simply rebellious. They are afraid and they hate what they're afraid of. What they really want to say is, I really wish God didn't exist. But they know he does and they're afraid of him. Even the atheist has to admit that. They're afraid of him. One of these days, I have had something I want to deliver to Messianic Deliver before I bring it to the Give God 90 audience. And it's actually that teaching of what if tomorrow morning we woke up and we realized God didn't exist? It was all just a fairy tale. What would happen? But because the Bible's real and true, we can maintain social order. If we woke up tomorrow morning and realized it's just a fairy tale, social order goes to pieces because there's no fear of eternity at that point. The real fear is not what happens to us in this life, it's what happens to us in the next. Stephen Hawking once said, well, when you're dead, you're dead. And he's kind of right. But he viewed it as an end. He did not view it as a beginning. He didn't view it as walking through a door. He didn't view it as taking a nap and getting up. That's not how he saw it. He saw it as terminal. It just stopped. And I used to joke about, I want to see one of these end of the world movies where we don't win. The end of the movie, the screen just goes black. It just goes black. You're done. It's over. We failed. Bruce Willis didn't blow up the asteroid. What was another one? The 2012 thing. The Mayan calendar was right. It just stopped. I think it'd be a great ending for a sci-fi movie myself, but there's absolutely no chance of a sequel to that movie.
No.
People have got to understand, and actually I should say Christians and Jews have got to understand how important this verse is. The people who hate you fear you. They're afraid of you. They're afraid of you because you have been given the authority that comes from being in the family of the Almighty. That's a lot of responsibility. And some of us, quite honestly, don't use it wisely.
Right.
We've got to get better at that. Jews and Christians alike have got to get better at that. There's room for improvement on both sides, but basically, if you realize why they hate you, you can go a long way to understanding the necessity. It's not that you have to make people like you, but the necessity of treating even the people who hate you fairly.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Somebody said that once, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
How about that? You've got where it. I think it's Leviticus. It says if your enemy's thirsty. No, it might be Numbers. If your enemy's thirsty, give him something to drink. Somebody else said that about 1,800 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Pray for your enemies. Ask God for counsel on them, all that kind of thing. It was all done later. All of it. He didn't come up with any of that stuff on his own. It was all done later. But understanding why they hate you is the key to the beginning, not necessarily of getting them to like you, but helping you to understand that you don't have to hate them back. Now, you don't have to be best friends with them either. Okay, you don't have to sit around a campfire and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Okay, that's not where I'm going with that. But there has to be that understanding, that respect, that
you can be cordial.
You can be cordial. Sometimes they won't let you be.
No.
And you avoid them. It's like the salesman that gets
or go out of your way to say hello.
Yeah, it's like the salesman. The salesman knocks on the door, knock, knock, knock. Person opens the door. It's like can I sell you a vacuum cleaner? No, they slam the door in their face. Well, the salesman doesn't stand there and keep knocking on the door, do they?
Not usually.
They go to the next house. They knock on the door. Eventually, somebody's going to say, "Yeah, show it to me. I need what you got today. Show it to me." I'm going here. There's a lot of Christians, especially, that believe that evangelizing simply means going out, knocking on a door. And I know I'm going to say it like this, but they'll knock on the door and somebody will open the door. It's like, "Can I tell you about Jesus?" That is not the way to win friends and influence people, folks, okay? You don't evangelize that way. You want to be a good witness? You follow the Creator's instructions. It's that simple. I know too many people that's worked for. Way too many people that's worked for. You want to influence somebody? You do exactly what Yeshua did. You be the example. You be the example. It's as simple as that. I think the storm passed finally. Maybe. And it cooled off a little too, so that's a good thing. Folks, I hope that having that brought out and understanding that when Yeshua says something, he's getting it from somewhere else, we can go back and we can see the reasons why he's saying this. There's a lot of times he's kind of, it seems like he skipped some stuff, but you've got to remember that the people he was talking to already knew the things we are expected to know. And it doesn't start in Matthew 1. It starts in Genesis 1. Because if you don't know Genesis through, in most Christian Bibles, Malachi, in the Hebrew Bible it's through Chronicles, if you don't know that, you're not going to understand Matthew through Revelation. They go hand in hand. They go side by side. It's that simple. But knowing where these things come from and knowing why they're there, knowing what they represent and how important they are, that's what we have to look for. That's what is going to help us as we go through our everyday lives. You've just been sitting there doing a lot of nodding tonight.
I'm agreeing with you.
I finally said something right. Must be good. It's a good day. Okay. Folks, I hope this has been a blessing to you. We have some important dates coming up in the next several weeks. The fall feasts are, depending on which calendar you follow, the fall feasts are already active or they're getting ready to be active. You know what? There's room for mistakes everywhere. That's what grace and mercy are for. Somebody, as long as we're trying and we're putting forth the effort, that's
right.
what it's all about. You've got to show some effort. Psalm 44 says, even if you forget my name, I think it's 42 or 44. Might be 42, now that I think about it. But he says, even if you forget my name, don't I know what you're trying to do? Don't I see that you're trying? That's what we're striving for. But as we're going through these fall feasts, remember what they're there for. Because what they're showing is not just the past, but it is also the future. Mm-hmm. I hope you have an extremely blessed week. We appreciate your support. We appreciate everything you do for us.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Listening.
Thanks for sharing. Hit those share buttons often. Vote early, vote often. Hit those share buttons as many times as you can. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.